They say history is written by the victors, but some stories are buried, not for being false, but for being too shameful to repeat. In the cradle of ancient empires, long before the desert winds carved kingdoms into dust, there was a king whose name has been erased from most records. A ruler so powerful, so adored, and yet so feared for what he did behind palace walls that his story became legend. A whispered tale that flickered like a cursed flame across the centuries. His kingdom was vast, drenched in gold and incense. Temples to forgotten gods towered over markets heavy with spices and slaves. The people bowed to him as divine. They believed he could command storms, that his bloodline was not merely royal, but sacred, touched by gods whose names had long since turned to dust in the mouths of priests. And this king, he did what all kings of sacred blood were expected to do. He married his sister. It was tradition, they claimed, a holy rite to keep the divine lineage pure. She was beautiful, they said, impossibly so. Eyes like wet obsidian, skin like moonlight over sand. But beauty can rot, and love, when twisted by power, can ferment into something else entirely. Behind the silk veils of the inner palace, something darker unfolded. It began with whispers, servants who vanished, midwives who refused to speak, a strange ritual, performed at night, involving a white goat and bowls of fermented honey. The high priest stopped visiting, and soon, so did the gods. The king's sister, now queen, was rarely seen by day. Some said she had taken a vow of silence. Others believed she was pregnant with a godchild, conceived during an eclipse, hidden from mortal eyes. But the truth was more disturbing. She was locked away, not by chains, but by madness, or guilt, or both. Guards who stood watch outside her chamber reported strange sounds, bleating, laughter, weeping, sometimes all at once, and when questioned, their eyes would flicker, as if their minds recoiled from what they'd seen. Then came the night of the disappearance. A blood moon rose, fat and red over the palace. The torches wouldn't light, the temple bells rang themselves. The goat, the same one rumored to be used in the rituals, was seen running through the palace halls, wearing a golden crown. No one spoke of it. The next morning, the queen was gone. The priests declared it a divine ascension. But behind closed doors, her chamber was found soaked in crimson, and the walls were scratched with symbols that no scribe could translate. Not then, not ever. And the king? He smiled, not the smile of grief nor of relief, but something colder, like satisfaction. He ordered the goat to be returned, and when it was, trembling, blood-specked, silent, he dressed it in silk and sat it on the throne beside him. From that day forward, the kingdom began to rot. The people tried to understand. Some said the queen had become the goat, transformed by divine wrath or love gone foul. Others whispered that the goat had always been the queen, wearing the form of a woman like a mask, luring the king into some cursed union. But no one dared speak these things aloud, because the king was listening. He watched his people not with suspicion, but with a kind of amused hunger, as if waiting for one of them to say the wrong thing, so he could silence them forever. He began to change the rituals. The temple dancers were replaced with animals, dressed in veils, paraded through the streets on feast days. Offerings once made to the gods were now placed before the throne for the goat. And the goat, adorned with sapphires and garlands, simply stared. It did not blink. It did not age. Some claimed its eyes glowed at night, reflecting more than just firelight, that its breath fogged mirrors in symbols, that it whispered in the queen's voice when the king was alone. Soon, madness became law. To question the king was to blaspheme. To doubt the goat was to die. Entire families vanished. Priests gouged out their own eyes. The great library was sealed, its scrolls burned in the name of purity. And the king, oh the king, he grew fat and drunk on devotion. A man who had married blood, then chaos, then myth. And through it all, the goat watched. But even in kingdoms ruled by madness, rebellion brews like rot beneath polished stone. They were called the Silent Ones, cloaked figures who gathered in the ruins of the old temple, where the true gods were once worshipped. Former scribes, midwives, and palace servants, those who had seen too much and lived too long. They spoke no words. Their mouths were sewn shut, literally, to protect their minds from the listening walls. Their thoughts were written in ash and wine, painted in secret chambers. And always they drew the same image, a goat crowned in fire, a king without eyes, and a woman with her heart in her hands. Legends say it was the royal cook who struck the first blow. One night, while the king slept in his chamber, the goat curled beside him like a bride. The cook slipped poison into the wine, not for the king, but for the goat. But it did not die. Instead, it opened its mouth and screamed. Not a bleat, not an animal cry, but a scream, high and human and full of sorrow. The palace shook, the skies split, and the goat vanished. In its place, the queen, naked, bloodied, eyes glowing like a storm. She looked at the king and said a single word, "Paris." Then, the entire chamber ignited in flame. By dawn, there was no palace, only a crater of scorched stone, blackened bones, and the smell of burnt incense. The king's crown was found melted into the floor, fused with the golden hooves of the goat. No body remained. The kingdom collapsed within days. Statues of the royal family were torn down or defaced. Temples were rededicated to new gods, quieter gods, who asked no questions and gave no dreams. But the story did not die. Even now, in forgotten villages, old women whisper it to children by firelight. He loved too deeply, she died too silently, and the goat was never just a goat. Some say the queen's spirit still walks the hills, heartless and hollow, searching for her brother. Others claim the goat appears to mad kings before their fall, a warning in fur and silence. And the throne? It still exists, buried beneath layers of ash and legend. They say if you sit upon it and speak your truest desire aloud, it will be granted. But at a cost, a terrible cost. So, if you ever find yourself deep in the ruins of a forgotten land, and you see a figure watching from the dark, with horns curled like guilt and eyes too human to ignore, turn away, because some stories were never meant to be told.